They brought him a creature unlike any he'd seen before. 8 feet tall, glowing blue veins, and 4 hearts beating out of sync. The alien was dying, and not a single one of its species could explain why. But this wasn't just any human. It was Dr. Elijah Voss, the man who once saved an entire planet with nothing but a stethoscope and intuition. As he leaned in to examine the being, he didn't find a virus. He found heartbreak. And what he did next changed the course of 2 civilizations forever. Dr. Elijah Voss had always believed that medicine was more than just biology. It was empathy in action. Known across human colonies as a doctor of the impossible, he'd been stationed on the diplomatic medical vessel Solace, orbiting the neutral alien world of Caerthas IV. The planet had opened limited contact with humanity only 6 months prior, and while political ties remained fragile, medical diplomacy was seen as a gesture of goodwill. So when the Caerthan delegation summoned Solace in a state of emergency, Dr. Voss was ready. What he wasn't ready for was her. The patient was unlike anything recorded in xenomedical databases. Tall, ethereal, shimmering with bioluminescent skin that pulsed in pale hues of violet and teal. Her name, when translated, meant something close to lure of the longing wind. She hadn't spoken since she was brought aboard, and her species' own physicians were baffled. They had ruled out infection, poison, neurological disruption, even spiritual disturbance, which in Caerthan culture was taken just as seriously as cellular decay. She was simply fading. Her 4 hearts were misfiring erratically. Her neurotransmitters were spiking and crashing in patterns that mirrored extreme emotional trauma, but with no identifiable cause. Dr. Voss, with his team of linguists and biologists, began his examination. Hours turned into days. The Caerthians grew tense, their high priest whispering that this sickness might be divine punishment for mingling with off-worlders. But Elijah saw something others didn't, subtle changes in Lyra's biopatterns when he spoke to her softly, when he looked into her eyes not with analysis, but with presence. Her heart rhythms, once chaotic, began to synchronize. Her skin glowed slightly brighter when he entered the room. And then came the breakthrough. When Elijah accidentally brushed her hand while adjusting a monitor, she flinched, not in pain, but like someone remembering a touch they longed for. That night, alone in his quarters, Elijah reviewed weeks of sensor data, logs of her stress responses, and visual recordings. The truth hit him like a tidal wave. Her symptoms mirrored that of an ancient human affliction. Not any physical disease, but something older, deeper, unfulfilled attachment. Lyra wasn't dying from illness. She was suffering from an extreme form of emotional deprivation. Her species experienced connection not just emotionally, but biochemically. Without reciprocated emotional bonding, her body was literally starving. The alien was lovesick. But what shook Elijah even more was who she was sick for. He returned to her chamber the next morning, his voice soft, hands ungloved now, a gesture of trust. He told her what he had discovered. Her eyes shimmered like starlight caught in deep water, and in that silence, she reached up and touched his cheek. Through the translator's imperfect rendering of Caerthan dialects, one word came through with unmistakable clarity: you. Every medical protocol Elijah had been taught about detachment, about non-interference, tugged at his mind. But something stronger rose in him. Compassion. Recognition. He had been the only one who looked at her not as a patient, not as a curiosity, but as a person. And in doing so, he had unintentionally become her anchor to life. The revelation stunned everyone on board. The medical team stared in disbelief as the monitors showed real-time improvements in Lyra's vitals, heart rate synchronizing, neural activity stabilizing, bioluminescent skin pulses growing steadier with every minute Elijah remained by her side. It defied every known model of alien physiology, every academic principle the Xenomedical Council had documented. But the truth was irrefutable. Lyra's survival depended on an emotional bond, one that had unknowingly formed between her and the human doctor during weeks of quiet care and whispered empathy. At first, the ship's command debated whether this connection violated any ethical code. But as Lyra began speaking again, her first words in weeks filled with gentle gratitude and strange, poetic metaphors about winds and warmth, it became clear that what was unfolding was more than romance. It was a bridge between 2 species. Still, it wasn't all starlight and serenity. Word of the diagnosis, emotional dependency on a human, caused an uproar back on Caerthas IV. The Caerthan elders called it a corruption of spirit, a contamination of pure lineage. Some even accused Dr. Voss of manipulation, arguing that no alien should have that level of influence over a Caerthan heart. Political factions began to mobilize. The Human Alliance advised Elijah to step back, warning him that his involvement could rupture fragile diplomatic ties. But how could he walk away? She was no longer just a patient. She was someone whose heartbeat had begun to echo his own. Elijah made a choice then, one that would define history. He went before both human and Caerthan diplomats and presented not just his findings, but his truth. He spoke of how emotion is not a weakness, but a universal constant, how understanding another being's pain and answering it with compassion is the highest form of diplomacy. He spoke of how Lyra's condition was not shameful but miraculous, a sign that two minds, two species, could find resonance across all barriers of language, biology, and tradition. The chamber was silent when he finished. Even the high priest of Caerthas remained quiet, eyes closed, as if listening to something older than politics. That moment didn't end all opposition, but it changed the conversation. Lyra recovered fully over the next few weeks, and her species eventually acknowledged the scientific significance of her condition. Caerthan scientists would later refer to it as a resonance effect, a rare but profound emotional harmonization between species with partially compatible neurochemical pathways. But to Elijah, it was something simpler. It was love in its rawest, most innocent form, a connection formed not by words or biology alone, but by presence, by seeing and being seen. They didn't stay aboard Solace forever. Eventually, Lyra invited Elijah to her homeworld, this time not as physician, but as a guest of her clan. He walked beneath glowing trees that hummed when the wind passed through, watched sky beasts soar above crystalline cliffs, and listened to Lyra's voice as she sang ancient Caerthan hymns beside lakes that reflected the stars. And in time, he learned the Caerthan word for what she felt, not just attraction, not even love as humans understood it, but a word that meant, the one whose presence teaches my soul to breathe. No human had ever been taught that word before, and thus the universe took a quiet breath. Because somewhere among the stars, a doctor didn't just heal an alien. He reminded all of us that no matter how different we seem, what makes us truly alive is the way we feel. Years passed, and the tale of the human doctor who diagnosed an alien with love sickness became more than just an anomaly in the medical logs. It became a legend told in both human academies and Caerthan oral histories. It was taught in classrooms, whispered in marketplaces, and painted on the inner domes of Caerthan star temples. Dr. Elijah Voss and Lyra of the Longing Wind had not just bridged two species. They had redefined the very idea of what it meant to understand. Their bond sparked a new era of interspecies psychological study, new protocols for emotional health and alien diplomacy, and even a movement among Caerthan youth known as the Resonance, who advocated for deeper empathy over ancient dogma. But for Elijah and Lyra, the spotlight eventually faded, and they were glad for it. They retreated from the noise of politics and research grants to a home carved into the cliffs of Caerthas IV, where the sky changed colors with the moons and gravity sang softly through the stones. Elijah would wake each day beside Lyra, often to find her already awake, sketching the constellations he once described to her from Earth's sky. In return, she taught him to listen, not just with ears, but with awareness. Caerthans didn't just speak, they resonated. They laid feeling into tone, emotion into silence. In time, Elijah no longer needed a translator. There were moments of hardship, of course. The differences between them weren't just poetic, they were practical. Elijah aged. Caerthans aged differently, slower. And though their lifespans could stretch across centuries, humans burned quickly by comparison. Lyra knew this. She felt it every time Elijah winced from a back pain, every time the gray in his beard thickened. And yet, she never withdrew. In Caerthan culture, to love something temporary is a sacred act. And Elijah, ever the human, ever fragile, ever brilliant, remained her sacred fire. In his final days, surrounded by glowing Caerthan flora and the warmth of Lyra's presence, Elijah wrote a final journal entry, one that would be quoted across species for generations. We look to the stars for answers. But sometimes, the answer looks back at you, not with words or light, but with a pulse that matches your own. I was sent to diagnose a stranger. I found a mirror, And through her, I finally understood what all medicine, all science, all searching had always been about. Not curing, but connecting. After he passed, Lyra mourned not with sorrow, but with song. Her people gathered as she releases ashes into the sky stream, where gravity bends and light never dies. And from that moment on, a new constellation was named in the Caerthan sky, Elijah, the one who healed with heart. Back on Earth, a statue was erected, not of Elijah alone, but of two figures standing hand in hand, human and Caerthan, stethoscope in one hand, open palm in the other. Below it, a single inscription. He didn't just save a life, he proved love as a universal language. And thus, in the infinite stretch of the cosmos, where logic often reigns and stars burn without feeling, a single story stood as proof that no matter how alien someone may seem, if you listen closely enough, you just might find they are not so different after all. And so, the story of Dr. Elijah Voss and Lyra of the Longing Wind lived on, not just in the pages of alien history or the recordings of galactic broadcasts, but in the quiet corners of the heart, where stories aren't just heard, but felt. Children from both worlds would ask their parents, "Can someone really get sick from love?" And the answer, passed down with a smile, was always, if love is the gravity that holds your soul together, then yes, without it, anyone can fall apart. Caerthan poet began writing verses in a hybrid tongue, human standard mixed with Caerthan resonance, a new form of art inspired by Lyra's voice and Elijah's cadence. Musicians crafted harmonies modeled after the pulse patterns recorded in Lyra's recovery, turning emotional waves into symphonies. Even engineers began designing medical AI that factored in emotional resonance and presence, not just biology. Love had become a variable in science. And deep in the archives of the Solus medical vessel, locked in a crystalline case surrounded by softly humming drones, lay a simple object, Elijah's stethoscope. The plaque beneath it read, the instrument that heard not just heartbeats, but longing. Somewhere, light years away from Earth, a Caerthan child would someday touch that glass and ask, what did it sound like? And the descent would smile gently and reply, like hope. Because in the end, Elijah and Lyra's story wasn't about curing a disease. It wasn't about heroism or breaking protocol or even interspecies romance. It was about one truth, that when two souls see each other, truly see each other, everything else becomes possible. Healing, peace, understanding, even love, as stars drift silently across the black canvas of the cosmos, and alien worlds turn in rhythms ancient and unknowable, one thing remains. That once, a human heard the unspoken cry of a dying heart, and answered not with medicine, but with presence. And in doing so, he didn't just change a life. He changed what it means to be alive. Years after Elijah's passing, Lyra still walks the paths of the Caerthan High Gardens, her presence unchanged, yet her eyes touched by the soft weight of memory. She no longer sings the hymns of loss, but melodies of continuation, notes that flow with gratitude and remembrance. Around her bloom the Eli flowers, bioluminescent petals genetically grown from Elijah's ashes, gifted to Caerthas by Earth Botanical Alliance. These flowers only open at night, and only when spoken to kindly. She kneels by a flower that pulses in faint blue and whispers, he would have loved this season. The petals unfurl. Behind her, a Caerthan child approaches, a student, curious and wide-eyed, holding an ancient data slate marked with a Human Alliance seal. The child asks, is the story true, Elder Lyra, that he heard your heart when no one else could? She smiles, not a sad smile, a knowing one. He didn't just hear it, she says, placing a hand gently over her chest. He taught it how to sing again. The child tilts her head. And did you love him like the stories say? Lyra's eyes reflect the twin moons above as she answers softly, more than any story could ever explain. Back on Earth, in a remote hilltop observatory, a new generation of students stares up at a holographic sky. One of the constellations, Elijah, the one Caerthas named, now shines brightly in both human and Caerthan sky catalogues, linked via dual planetary recognition. A young human girl asks her instructor, why does that star cluster mean the one who healed with heart? The teacher chuckles gently, because once upon a time, in the silence between worlds, a doctor didn't look at an alien and see a problem. He saw a person. And that made all the difference. The Caerthan-human alliance has grown. Trade flows freely between their worlds. Languages have intermingled, and once foreign traditions now feel like shared holidays. Children on both sides learn about resonance, not just as science, but as something sacred, a subject taught in schools and whispered during bedtime stories. But still, no case like Lura's has been seen since. Many try to replicate the study, to trigger the same reaction, to understand the math of the miracle. And though great progress has been made in empathy-based medicine, everyone knows the truth deep down. What happened between Dr. Elijah Voss and Lura was not data. It was destiny. And so the story becomes a legend, then a parable, then something bigger. A traveling storyteller arrives in a dust-covered village at the edge of a new colony. Children gather, lighting soft paper lanterns that rise into the pink dusk sky. The old man begins. Have you ever heard of the human who healed a dying alien not with medicine, but with the sound of his own heartbeat? The children gasp, nodding. One of them, a hybrid child with soft violet skin and human eyes, whispers, "You mean the Star Doctor?" The storyteller smiles. Yes, the Star Doctor. He listened when no one else did. He stayed when others walked away. And because of him, we now know that love isn't a human invention. It's the language of life itself. And across light years, deep in the Caerthan Star archives, a historian finishes restoring the last fragments of Lura's personal journal. Her final entry, translated and archived in every major galactic language, reads, "Love was never limited by species or skin. It lived in how he sat quietly beside me, in the way he remembered my rhythms, in how he asked nothing in return but presence. I did not just survive because of Elijah Voss. I became." The ship is named the Lura Voss, the first deep-range joint exploration ship designed by both species. Its mission? To search uncharted space, not for conquest, not even for resources, but for understanding. On its hull, engraved in glowing silver, "Let the stars witness what love once healed." And as the ship accelerates past Saturn's rings, into the vast unknown, the voice of Lura plays over the intercom for the crew's maiden voyage. To those who walk where we once stood, may your hearts remain open, and may you always remember, some cures come not from medicine, but from being seen. Floating in the black between stars is a massive, cathedral-like structure made of Caerthan crystal and Terran steel, known only as the Archive of Heartbeats. Its spires reach out like hands toward distant constellations. Inside, silence is sacred, not empty, but full of meaning. Along the inner walls are holograms, living memories encoded from the minds of both species, dancing softly like candlelight. One hall is always more crowded than the rest. The resonance chamber. A single image glows at its center, Elijah, gently holding Lura's hand, her eyes glowing with the first hint of life returning. Around it, light text whispers their story in hundreds of languages. Pilgrims come not for religion, but to remember what made their modern world possible. And in this space, people don't speak. They listen. Some come alone, others in pairs. And when they leave, they press their palm to the wall as tradition demands, leaving behind a single heartbeat, recorded and preserved, a reminder that they too felt something real. An amphitheater filled with beings, some with wings, some scaled, some cybernetic, and many looking somewhere between human and Caerthan. The lecturer, Dr. Raylan Vostell, steps forward. She wears her ancestors' names like honor. It wasn't their differences that made them legendary. It was their choice to see past them. The greatest change in our shared history began not with a treaty, but with a touch, a moment, a human hand and an alien heart. The class listens, not just with ears, but with resonance implants, tuned to feel emotion alongside information. It's no longer enough to learn facts in this era. You must feel the truth to truly know it. Archaeologists brush away stardust and time. Beneath the stones, carved into the walls in the ancient resonance script, is a final message. He didn't come to conquer. He didn't come to cure. He came and stayed. And through that presence, we lived. The message is dated centuries after Lura's passing, placed there by her descendants, part human, part Caerthan, all born from a moment of impossible connection. A parent leans down beside a bunk. The child asks, blinking softly, "Mama, Do you think aliens can love us like we love them? The parent smiles and replies, They already did, sweetheart. That's why we're here.